Hello, my name is Taryn Fivek, and I'm a reporter with People's World here in New York. And today we are joined by Dom Shannon, a D2 amateur rugby player in Philadelphia who plays for a women's plus team, as it includes many trans and non binary players. Dom is a former team captain who has nearly a decade of experience with the game and is, I think it's safe to say, pretty passionate about women's sports. And we're very grateful that Dom is able to join us today and discuss a little bit about what their impressions were around the 2024 Olympics, and especially as it relates to women's sports. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dom.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be talking about really important subject to me. I think it's going to continue to be important to a lot of working people in the United States and people who are interested in democracy and social justice and democratic rights. So happy to be here. Happy to be talking about this.
Of course, yeah. So you watched the Olympics this year, or at least you were keeping an eye on it.
Yeah, watching very closely, watching the United States athletes doing really really well in their events, which is really exciting to see Black athletes, kind of on the highest stage there, representing our country really well and just going all out. It's been really great to see.
Yeah. So do you think that women this year were more visible than they were in previous games?
Yeah, I mean, I think over time, women athletes have gotten a lot more visibility. It's something that I've noticed. I think every Olympics, there's a new sort of breakout star that from not just the United States but a bunch of countries that people are paying close attention to. Um, People like Shakari Richardson and Simone Biles, Katie Ledecky, all those really really great athletes have, like I said, been representing our country really well, and really just sort of the highlight of the whole thing.
Yeah, so when I was a kid, Dom, I noticed that there was a lot of coverage when it came to the Olympics of more like, I guess, delicate sports. I don't want to call it delicate because obviously all these people are like extreme athletes. But it was focused on like gymnastics and figure skating and stuff. But now we're hearing more and more about women who are in, rugby or women who are boxers. So what's your impression on that? What do you think has changed over time?
I think just sort of the struggle for equality has led to women being. I mean, women were always in these realms, but the coverage of women in these realms and playing these sports has definitely expanded, and people are paying attention. Another sport is basketball. Women's basketball has just blown up over the last, really, I would say, like a year to 2 years. People are really, really paying attention, and the women's national team at the Olympics this year, the basketball team, did really well. They won gold. They did really well as well, and people are starting to pay attention. And I think it's again, I think it's just a matter of people struggling for equality and people seeing that women's sports can be just as entertaining as men's sports.
Yeah, I mean, I wish that the coverage was all totally positive of women's sports this year, but unfortunately, there was a bit of drama around some of the female athletes, and where people were actually online like calling them men and stuff. And so I'm just wondering, since you play with a women's plus team, if you could express maybe where you think that that was coming from.
There's always, when women or minority groups are being highlighted, you're sure to find some some naysayers, and they're usually on the right. Folks who want to tear people down. Of course, the usual suspects, people like Elon Musk and Trump's running mate JD Vance had a lot to say about the boxer from Algeria, and some other folks had a lot to say about some of the rugby players on our women's team. I think it has a lot to do with women athletes getting more visibility, and that it runs counter to their whole worldview, and sort of the machinations of capitalism that they'd like to see, that are totally at odds with the trajectory, the historical trajectory of our country and of the world in general. And they're doing everything in their power to stop it. It doesn't just remain in the sort of electoral arena. They're interested in sort of mitigating and the cultural shift and turning it back to what it was and what they're comfortable with. And again, against the sort of historical trajectory and social trajectory of the whole world. And they have a very clear agenda that, and they're not inconspicuous at all. Unfortunately, so I think this, right wing nut jobs being right wing nut jobs, sort of par for the course there.
Right, yeah. But I mean, it just really felt so strange because on one hand you have this sort of like the best in their league, except for the breakdancer from Australia. We won't talk about that. But you had like the best in our leagues, the greatest athletes, and they had worked so hard to make it this far, and then suddenly they're being called men. And I wondered to myself, I was like, is that misogyny or is that transphobia or is that somehow both? And I'm just wondering if you might want to share a little bit what you think about that question. Which is it, or is it both?
I think it's both, and I mean, it's this is. I think it goes to show that their whole number one, their whole argument about trans athletes in sports just totally crumbles when you realize that the athletes that they're claiming are trans aren't trans. They're just very strong women, just like trans athletes. They're very strong women. That's sort of the whole point of sports, is that, it's no one is going around to LeBron James and saying he has a biological advantage and so he shouldn't be involved in this sport. Or when Michael Phelps, who had like a X time the normal lung capacity and like huge, wingspan, no one said he has a biological advantage. No one said that. But of course, when women are strong, and playing in sports and dominating the sports that they're playing in, suddenly there has to be a reason why this is. And that's what they're sort of searching for when they accuse women athletes of being trans. And again, like I said, I think it just goes to show how faulty their argument is that, number one, women are just strong, of course, and when you put women, of course, the women at the highest stage of their particular sport, um, are strong as hell, and we shouldn't exclude trans people from that. Like, regardless of whether trans people are stronger or not, that doesn't make a difference, because everyone in every sport has a biological advantage over some other athlete or the athlete that they're competing against. That's the whole point. So their argument is faulty in and of itself. It's frankly just really dumb, and you can tell a lot of these jokers have never played sports in their life, because if
Right.
they did, they would never even make this argument, because again, having a competitive advantage over your opponent is the whole point of sports. So if they had played sports, they knew a lick about sports, they wouldn't be making these arguments.
Right. Yeah. No, it does seem a little bit, I don't know, I don't want to say that they're jealous that they're not that good, but it does seem a little bit strange. I mean, I was on
It's JV baseball team energy,
right, exactly.
Spin Strider energy.
Exactly. I was on TikTok the other day and I saw this one conservative person who does this. He's trying to promote a dating website. Like, yeah, good luck. But he said something that I thought was really interesting because I felt like it sort of gave the game away in some regards. He said, I know it's bad that there are transgenders, which obviously isn't the right way to say it. I'm just quoting him directly. I know it's bad that there are transgenders in women's boxing, but has anybody asked why women are boxing in the first place? And I felt like this kind of gave the game away because I feel like there's this impression where, like with Alana Mayer, for instance, who's a beautiful woman and extremely talented and, is always having to come out and say it's okay for me to have broad shoulders, for instance. And so I'm wondering, is it, when they talk about a war on women's sports, what's the war exactly?
Well, they're the ones waging the war, really. They don't care about women's sports unless they can use it for their own political agenda. To like, again, to tear down not just trans athletes but women in general. And again, as you said, they gave the game away. It's that they don't want women to be playing sports. They don't. And I'm sure there's a political agenda behind it. Of course, I think it's sort of in the same vein of as JD Vance saying, the whole point of postmenopausal women is to be grandparents or watch after their grandchildren. It's the same sort of line of thinking there that women serve in their minds, women serve a particular purpose, and women playing sports, women being childless, does not serve the purpose that I have for them in my mind. Therefore, I have to tear them down, even despite the fact that the entire globe is against them. Is it? I mean, maybe not rhetorically, but in terms of women's sports and women athletes getting more visibility and more coverage, it's very obvious that people want to be watching women in sports. They're the ones who don't want to be watching women in sports. They're the ones who are waging a war on women athletes. So when you hear these people say like, "Oh, we want to protect the sanctity of women's sports," just they're lying, because then when women are strong, women are competing at the highest level, like Ilana Mar, suddenly it's she shouldn't be playing sports, or she's a man, or she has we need to investigate her for being whatever, or the Algerian boxer as well. So there is a war on women's sports going on, but it's not progressives, it's not trans people, it's not any of us, any of the people who are invested in democracy. It's the right wing goons and frankly just losers who are waging the war on women. It's not us. We want women. And we want everyone to be able to have play sports and engage in recreational activities that they like. I mean, that's the whole. That's a part of a well functioning society. In my mind, is that people should be able to play sports, read a book, go to the movies, do this, do that. And they're recreational in their free time. And they're the ones who want to control. They're the ones who want to domineer. They're the ones that who want to tell you you can do this and you can do that, but you can't do this and you can't do that and you can't do it this way. And if you look like this, you can't do this. They're the ones who are doing all that stuff. It's not progressive. So when you hear them, going on their tirades as they do, just don't believe them, because they're phonies, they're liars, and really take a look at what they're saying, and make that judgment. I think anyone would tend to agree with what I'm saying.
Yeah, because if we want to talk about a war on women's sports, we can start with the pay gap, for instance, right? I think I remember when Brittany Griner was imprisoned in Russia, that was one of the things that you were speaking about in a different venue, right? Is the fact that like women's sports aren't as valued as men's sports, and that you can very clearly see that in their paycheck. And I remember, I forget who the athlete was, maybe who was visiting like the Olympic Village every day to get free healthcare. I mean, these are things that are bothering women's sports, not as much as, the cyberbullying is a problem, I guess.
Yeah, it was another rugby player. I remember seeing those videos, and yeah, I mean it's really crazy that I'm sure it wasn't just her or just the women athletes in the Olympic Village. I'm sure there were some men athletes who were also trying to get their healthcare in, because the healthcare issue in the United States is just horrible in general. But yeah, it's true that there is a huge pay gap between men and women athletes. I mean, I think about the one that immediately, the three that immediately come to mind, just because there's a some of the more popular ones is the women's national team soccer, the women's national soccer team, and the men's national soccer team, and how the men's national soccer team for the United States, they absolutely suck, right? They are horrible, but they get way more coverage, way more notoriety, way more opportunities than the women's soccer team, and they just won gold. And the same thing for the women's basketball teams in the United States, between the NBA and the WNBA. I remember seeing somewhere that that the NBA mascots make more money than the WNBA players, which and it's not to say that the people who do our mascots shouldn't make a lot of money. I think that they should, because I'm sure that's a tough job. Um, but also that the WNBA players certainly deserve a ton of money. I think more. I don't know if this is actually, I don't know what the figures on it, but there are certainly uh, maybe just as much, if not more, people watching the women's NCAA final than the men's. I would say that they're probably very comparable. In fact, I think the men's NCAA final was actually pretty lackluster this year, and not entertaining. At least not as entertaining as the women's one, with Caitlin Clark and not Angel Reese, but Dawn Staley and her whole squad going against each other. So Camille Caruso. That's who I was thinking of. So yeah, they certainly deserve more. Even the women's national team for rugby versus the men's team. The women's national team is so much better than the men's rugby national team, and it's no hate to them. Of course, we play the same sport, so I don't want to hate on the men's national team, of course, but the women's team is just that much better. And it seems like the men's rugby gets. I've experienced it playing rugby. They get far more opportunities and notoriety, and even like just at my level where the men play at 1, but and we kick off at 11. But why can't we switch or like alternate, right? Like, why do we always have to kick off first at 11 a.m. on a Saturday when not a lot of people want to come out and watch us play, but the men can kick off at 1, where that's a time where people would come out and watch a rugby match in their community, right? So it's little things like that, but of course, it starts at that level, but it goes all the way up, and I think the tide is really starting to change, and the women's basketball in particular, and I think that that'll cause a really important and necessary trickle effect into other women's sports.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, so Dom, who was your favorite women's athlete in the Olympics this year?
Uh,
Give you
I
the
really like them
softball.
all. I really like them all. I was thinking the other day, I think I tweeted, I was like, I wish somehow, I don't know if it's possible to make or if it would be kind of cheesy to make, but like I really would love like a Katie Ledecky jersey. I know there's no jerseys in swimming, but I would love a Katie Ledecky jersey and a Shakari Richardson jersey and a Coco Golf jersey. Like, I think all those three women, all the Simone Biles too. I want a Simone Biles jersey. Somehow, someone out there, please make these jerseys. I would buy all four of those. These women are so inspiring to not just to me, but I think young athletes everywhere are inspired by all these women, and it's so just great to see them on the national, on international stage, representing our country, and I think that there's something to be said about a lot of the athletes getting recognition are black athletes. I think that's so important, on the international stage, to represent our country, and to show the whole world that black people, and particularly black women athletes, do have a place in this country, and need to have a meaningful say in this country, and can represent our country at the highest level in any sort of any arena, whether it's sports, whether it's politics, whether it's really anything. Black people are excellent uh, at almost everything we do. So it was really really important to see that, and it was really really inspiring to see them perform, and it was honestly an honor to watch.
Well, I have one more question for you. What kind of advice would you give? What kind of advice would you give to a young athlete who sees this kind of discourse around uh, this transphobic, misogynistic, frankly racist discourse around some of our women athletes at the Olympics, and becomes discouraged by that? What kind of advice would you give a young athlete who's in that situation?
Um, I would say never stop fighting for your position and for your right to participate in sports. Train hard and prove everyone wrong, um, because you will prove everyone wrong, and you're going to make enemies by doing that. But that doesn't matter, um, because there's when you're exist in this sort of identity, people are going to hate you no matter what. So you might as well have them hate you for being an excellent athlete, and prove them wrong, and never stop fighting. Never stop fighting for your right to be there, because history will be on your side. There are going to be millions of people like me, like Taryn, like the Communist Party, and anyone, any progressive worth their salt, and who cares about this stuff, who cares about these sort of politics, will be on your side. There's millions of people behind you. So never stop fighting for your right to participate. Train hard and prove all of these losers wrong, because either one way or another they're going to hate you, so they might as well hate you for being a great athlete. That's what I would have to say to them.
I love that advice, Dom. Thank you very much for joining us today. I know you have to get to another appointment right now, so thank you so much for taking the time and speaking with People's World about this. We hope to have you on in the future to discuss more about sports and our political, very unique, very working class bias take on sports. So thank you again, Dom.
Thank you. Glad to have talked about it.